Enjoy early access to ad-free episodes each week when you subscribe to Wedding Planning Podcast Premium in Apple Podcasts. Enjoy the show. Why, hello there. Happy Friday. What a treat to get to spend some time together on a Friday because it's always Wednesday. So here's the deal. I am going to do a bit of a test for the month of November, and I'm going to be running a quick weekly Q&A follow-up show after each Wednesday featured episode. So if you're loving these follow-up Q&As, I will keep going. But to do so, I do need your questions, thoughts, and ideas about that previous week's episode. So here's how it's going to work. Be sure to follow the Wedding Planning Podcast on whatever listening platform you enjoy, and I will send a free weekly episode to your device each Wednesday. Okay? Very simple. If you're a podcast listener, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If by any chance you have any questions about that process, please feel free to reach out. Happy to expound. So follow the Wedding Planning Podcast. Get that free show each Wednesday. After you listen to that show, be in touch with your thoughts, your questions, your ideas, and you can do that either in an email or a voicemail, and I will share those questions, those stories, those thoughts the following Friday, if that makes sense. So you can be in touch by visiting our website, weddingplanningpodcast.co/contact, or you can send me a DM on Instagram. I am Wedding Planning Podcast, all one word, very easy to remember. And with that, here's this week's featured follow-up question to the show dated October 30th, where we talked about 5 real wedding planning scenarios, and we asked ourselves, is this a crazy idea? Will this even work? This listener writes, I loved this week's show and I have my own crazy wedding idea I'd love to run by you. My fiance and I are getting married next spring, so 2025. And if I'm being totally honest, photography is not at the top of our priority list. Admitting this feels a little crazy in itself because I feel like everyone is so adamant about your wedding photos being all you have to remember the day. You have to invest a ton of money in your photographer or else you'll regret it. Blah, blah, blah. And yes, that's a direct quote, blah, blah, blah. Some of my friends are pretty into photography, also my aunt and my cousin. You can probably see where this is going, and I respect your honesty and non-judgment zone, and am just curious if you think asking my family and friends to manage our wedding day photos is an insane/stupid idea. Okay, so let's unpack this, shall we? Thank you very much for bravely sharing your question that I know more people wonder than will ever actually admit. And to start things off, as you could probably guess, no, I don't think your idea is insane or stupid. However, I would love to run through some things to consider. And I'm going to go about this in kind of a roundabout way with a personal story. And that is that my now husband and I hired our wedding photographer off Craigslist for $500. True story. So take a minute to let that sink in. Now, was this risky? Yes. Did we do a whole boatload of due diligence and research in our process? Yes. And there was, in our case, a huge reward at the end of the day. And that huge reward was that the person who we chose to take a chance on, this rookie up-and-coming wedding photographer, it turned out that he showed up exactly as a professional would on our wedding day. He went above and beyond in the editing process, throughout the day, in his methods, in his ways of interacting with us and our friends and our families. Everyone was incredibly impressed by his presence and also incredibly impressed by the end result, which of course is beautiful wedding photos that we do still cherish to this day. And I'm going to go one step further with that thought because although we do cherish those photos, I've been married for 14 years and we have since had 2 children. So when you walk into my house, I have exactly one wedding photo on display, like in the public living area. And that's a photo of me and John and both of our mom and dads. So the 6 of us. That's the one wedding photo that's on display in our home 14 years later. Now, does this mean that the other photos are not amazing? No, of course not. They are amazing and they are in albums, and I do cherish them and I do love looking over them at least once a year around our anniversary, if not more than that. However, in the course of our married life together, 14 years holds a ton of adventure and fun. And again, our 2 children and all of the collective experiences that we've had over those 14 years with our friends, with our families. I don't mean this to sound bad or negative, but our wedding day is a very distant, very precious memory. But our wedding photos do not have a center stage in our home or in our life now, 14 years later. So do with that what you will. That's just my very honest, very personal experience with wedding photos and kind of a time capsule for you to, again, do with the information what you will. I'm not saying that you would feel the exact same way, but that's my personal opinion and my personal experience on the topic. Now, back to the theoretical idea of hiring someone who you find on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace or at a local community college who's studying photography, wherever it is that you would, in theory, go out and research. Getting references, having a face-to-face meeting, and having a complete contract are absolutely non-negotiable essential items before exchanging any money or before making any verbal commitment to working with someone on photography, videography, or anything else concerning your wedding for that matter. It may seem like we're off track, but I promise this is all going somewhere. I share this personal story only because I do think, with all of that said, that there's a huge gray area between hiring a professional wedding photographer for $5,000 and, on the flip side, trusting your friends and family to do it for free for you. Now, I'm not suggesting that your loved ones are not great, skilled photographers. I'm sure they are. I'm more so suggesting that asking your loved ones to work all day at your wedding that you've invited them to, that can be a lot to ask. So what does that gray area look like for you? That's something that you and your fiance might want to discuss. And you may, at the end of the day, decide to go with your friends and family. And I think that's absolutely fine too. We're going to get to that in a little bit deeper level in just a second. And where you end up taking things from here, you have my full support. I mean, I know we're technically strangers on the internet, but I certainly feel like I know you to a degree when you reach out and send your wedding situations and your questions and your emails. And I really, really appreciate that. I don't want that to be lost. And if you are listening and you have something on your mind that feels embarrassing to ask, or you would feel like you would just be completely butchered if you ever brought it up online or in a chat room, send it to me. It's completely anonymous. I will never share your name. I will never share any details that you don't want me to share. And again, I bring that up because I do feel a connection with listeners, especially once you've reached out and sent me what's on your mind. So that's the place that my advice to you comes from. And then, okay, let's get back on track. On that note, let's take your idea, asking your friends and family to do your wedding photos for you. That's what we're talking about today. And let's run that through some of the guidelines that we reviewed in Wednesday's episode on how to kind of self-judge the feasibility of your idea or your theoretical plan. So those guidelines, and again, this is straight from our show on Wednesday. If you missed it, it was a good one. Go back and listen. The first guideline is asking yourself, is my idea scalable? So in this situation, I would say if you have a wedding of 300 guests and it's really, really important to you that you get candid photos and posed photos and family photos, 300 guests for like 12 hours over the course of one day, that to me is not scalable. That to me is not something you can ask your aunt and your cousin to manage between the two of them. That to me is like a professional team of 4 to 6 people who are doing coverage of that large of an event. I don't know if that applies to you or not. I'm not sure the size of your wedding, but that's the first kind of checkpoint we have. The second checkpoint is, do I have enough help to pull this off? It sounds like you have at least 2 friends who are into photography, in addition to an aunt and a cousin, if I read that correctly. That's 4 people. So given that all 4 people are on board and all 4 people are willing to make this commitment to you and to help you out with this, and all 4 of them have a reliable phone or camera or whatever kind of device they're going to be using, if you're having more of like a mid to average size wedding, so like 100-ish people, and it's confined to, one location, I think 4 people helping you take photos across the day, I think that's enough help. So we can mark a check mark next to that one. And the next checkpoint is really, really important. And that is, am I delegating the right things to the right people? So really sit with that one and think about your friends, your aunt and your cousin. Are these 4 people the right people to ask to do this? If they have enthusiastically been begging you for 2 months, like, please just let us take this off your plate. We want to do this. We are very passionate about taking photos at your wedding and sharing them with you and all of the work and commitment that entails. If that's their attitude, 100% check it off. If you are just kind of assuming that because they enjoy photography, that maybe they would be willing to do this for you, then that kind of warrants some further conversations with them, I think. So don't gloss over this checkpoint. Am I delegating the right things to the right people? Are they able-bodied? Are they able to move around? Can they be on their feet for 12 hours during that day? Do they have the mental and time space after the wedding to be editing all these photos and getting them back to you? So those are all really, really important questions to ask yourself. And then the next checkpoint I'm going to highlight, and by the way, I am only choosing the checkpoints that are really applicable to this question. There were more within that episode, but the next one that's kind of really applicable here is, what's the worst case scenario if it doesn't work? What are the downsides if these photos come back horrible, if they don't come back at all, if it takes 9 months for everyone to get them edited and back to you? Just think about how that would feel, how you would handle that. What would your backup be? And then the last checkpoint to kind of ask yourself is the added work, logistics, planning, and stress, both to you and to your friends and to your aunt and to your cousin, to all of you collectively. Is that worth the payoff? So is it worth the payoff of not having to spend $5,000 on photography? Is it worth the payoff of potentially finding an up-and-coming photographer who you could just pay $500 to $600 to $700? Again, I don't know the answer to these questions. This is just kind of my process and my approach for how I would start to sit with things and think over things and massage things in your brain mentally as you're coming to a decision. And then to wrap things up for today, I do have a completely free resource that I think you might find helpful as well. Anyone who has photography on the brain, and as you're going through the process of hiring a professional photographer or maybe a semi-professional photographer, this is a mini planning package of sorts, and it's called Photography and Videography Masterclass. And I will put a link to that in today's written show notes. In addition to the personal story I shared with you earlier in the show about how we found and hired our wedding photographer for $500, you will also find resources on capturing professional quality photos at your pre-wedding events. I love that topic. There's so much value in that alone. There's also a audio on how to do your own engagement photo shoot. Actually, that might be a PDF. I'm sorry. These are a mix of like PDF and audios. And then the last one is how to do your own videography. So that's a gem. Speaking of doing it yourself, doing your own videography is possible. My own sister did it. It turned out absolutely amazing. She didn't even do it for budgetary reasons. She literally did it because she could not find someone who she liked and trusted enough to invest the cost. So she said, you know what, screw it. We're going to just do this ourselves. And it turned out great. So yes, this little mini package all about photography and videography, it is entirely free. No, you do not need to enter a credit card or any payment details whatsoever, just your name and your email address. And again, you'll find a link to that in today's show notes. Coming up next week, I have an amazing listener wedding to highlight. Samantha will be here to tell us all about her September 2024 wedding that featured no cell service, just 6 electrical outlets, and a hot air balloon send-off on Sunday morning for the new bride and groom. You will not want to miss this one. I'm so excited to share it with you. And be sure to get your questions in for next Friday's featured Q&A. Link in the show notes to take a look when you have a hands-free moment. And we will talk again next week, same time, same place.